Hey, what's up, Special K? How are you, man?
I knew you were going to pull that.
I had to. And you know what? I promise not to do it every time. I just had to do it once because I'm going to open with a very short story that after that episode where AI named you Special K, I think it was Gemini, I got a LinkedIn connection request with a note saying, I'm connected to Special K. And I just wanted to reach out and connect with you. And I replied back with a Nano Banana image of you on a box of Special K. And that was my reply. And it was the best LinkedIn exchange I've had maybe ever, I'd say. Not that that's I'm setting the bar really high there. It's LinkedIn, but hey, it made my day.
And this is how nicknames stick.
I know. It's always the most unfortunate ones that you hate the most. And those are the ones that stick. But
thank you, AI. Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you for that.
Yeah. It's doing a lot for you. And it's also quickly diminishing your life in other ways, and this is probably the leading one. I got a question for you, bud. I was thinking about this morning. Do you have like a favorite movie that depicts AI in either, a fun, happy way, even though now I'm struggling to think of any that do, or like a doomsday way, or a way that you felt like is kind of relatable to how things are playing out right now? Does anything come to mind for you?
I think that's actually a really interesting question because I'm a big fan of science fiction and have been my whole life. And science fiction has been thinking about artificial intelligence, all for 100 years, basically, and trying to find corollaries that make sense as far as the direction that things are heading has been sort of an objective for me. So in books, I feel best about Ian M. Banks, the culture novels. It's this vision of far superior machines that are living in pretty much harmony with their human friends. And it's not sycophantic at all, but they've developed a symbiosis between them. And it's a very interesting read if you're into that. On the film side, I would say that Her with Scarlett Johansson is the one that's been getting a bunch of press as far as companions.
Because that's where my brain always goes to, but I've missed the press on that. So I'm not the only one who's kind of connecting the dots there about like how uncannily it's starting to roll out.
Well, even down to the lawsuits with Scarlett Johansson suing OpenAI.
That was crazy.
Yeah, well, that's where it came from, almost certainly. Okay. But that idea of self-reinforcing, like sycophantic bot, like that's a different channel, as it were, as far as how the human bot interactions might look, and already are starting to look with companion AI and some of these tools. So kids and adults are totally leaning into that world. So if you haven't watched Her, it's a bit of a downer, I would say.
Yeah, but it's so well done, though. I mean, yeah, for people who haven't seen it, I mean, it's Joaquin Phoenix. Ultimately, he falls in love with an AI, right? And that has all sorts of meta vibes already with the personal companions and stuff. So you can connect the dots there. But I said the thing that really grabbed me as being kind of a tech dork, and especially around the hardware side, was that for the entire movie, he and everybody else are having this chat through an audio interface, just wearing like a single earpiece, and it's connected to a smartphone. And I find myself using the tools more and more like that. And every time I do, and I'm just driving in the car by myself, having a conversation with AI, I'm like, "Oh, I'm Joaquin Phoenix. Like this is kind of eerie." And then I don't know if you caught the news. I think it was a leak from OpenAI about Johnny Ive's design about this interface that they're working on. OpenAI is obviously making a play for hardware, hiring the badass designer from Apple who then started his own thing, and they just bought his whole venture. And they're talking about these bone conductive versions of AirPods, that like kind of just stick to the back of your skull, and you'd be able to have these ongoing conversations without even appearing to have something like in your ears at all, right? So this total stealth thing that, I don't know, I've got a lot of mixed feelings about just augmented reality or having a display in my face and getting my notifications or advertisements or everything in my glasses all the time. So I always thought like, audio is where it's at. So I'm like, wow, just another jump into the world of science fiction, like that's kind of playing out in real time.
So that I am just a massive fan of audio interfaces, and I absolutely think that that's the way it's going. If anybody in our audience hasn't already experimented with non-Apple dictation tools like Super Whisper or Whisper Flow, you absolutely need to, because it changes it changes not just the speed of your output, but it changes the style of your output to be much more conversational. And, humans are built to be conversational. We're tribal creatures and we're used to having conversations. And the fact that we type with our hands is just more a factor of the way that technology evolved than it being a natural occurrence at all. So it makes all the sense in the world for me that you're going to get to this audio interface. And that future, I think, the idea of just being able to walk along, if you're walking or you're sitting at your desk, and fill in a lot of the gaps of I need to kick off this project, or I need a reminder about whatever this is, that sort of stream of consciousness, add this to my queue, whatever. I think a lot of it from a science fiction perspective actually does look like Iron Man Jarvis.
Totally.
And the idea of kicking back in your chair and being able to open this project or that project, and as agents start coming along, be able to reasonably confidently start executing on things, as opposed to right now where you're triggering off individual projects. You might have a bunch of different windows that are open at once, and there's a lot of switching. And in fact, there's a lot of switching cost there. And I really think we're very, very close to the point where you can start carrying things several steps further just by talking to your advice.
I've got more on that too that I want to talk about in a bit. But yeah, you mentioned we're conversational creatures. It's how we evolved to just communicate in general, how to convey our thoughts, everything else. So when you talk about the Jarvis interface, the Iron Man helmet on your head, and seeing folders and opening things and like moving workflows around in virtual space, for me, it just sounds so much less appealing than just talking about it. And it may not have the same level of efficacy, right? You can't really, you may have forgotten the names of the folders that you want to access or move things around in, and that might be difficult to do through audio. But just this idea of the technology really mimicking how we have behaved for the last 300,000 years versus putting a bunch of stuff in our face, to me just sounds so much more appealing and so much more sustainable and better for our brains as well, just better for your mental health than taking this giant desktop I have with 3 monitors and just wrapping it around my head with, an augmented reality with a pair of goggles. Like that to me sounds like a direction I personally don't want to go down, but I think that we're going to see multiple paths. Like there's going to be a bunch of forks. That will be one of them. Audio only will be one of them. And yeah, I second the chat interface, the non-OS version, like Super Whisper or Whisperflow. It'll change your life. Like it really will.
So to be clear, it's not the Jarvis part where he's like pinching folders and moving stuff around. That's sort of stupid. You do need some sort of visual representation of it, but it's this idea of an agent orchestrator who can make those things happen. I'm just
Right.
As you were talking, I'm thinking about something that I would like to do with the show, that we have all of these transcripts that come out the other end. And yes, I could spend some time with N, or I could build a rag based on all of the information, such it's there, and we can call upon it. And it's not so impactful to my life that I've actually leaned into it on a Saturday to do versus some of the other crazy stuff I'm doing. But think about it. We have transcripts that are in Google Drive. We have transcripts that are stored locally. The ability to have a conversation with Claude, let's call it Claude Cowork versus Claude Code. We talked about this a little bit last time. As far as the direction that's going, but this is going to happen. Your first task is, hey, we have transcripts that are spread all over the Google universe and are spread all over my desktop. Can you find all of the transcripts for AI at work and move them to a centralized folder that you can do something with? Okay, cool. Now it's off doing that thing. And then you have a second conversation that starts, which is the next thing that we want to do once all those transcripts are in place is we want to build an information repository and use RAG. So build an embedding structure that allows that to happen. Okay, great. Now I envision a series of apps that sit on top of it that we can put in front of our audience, we can put in front of our teams, et cetera. And I trigger off 3 other agents that are running off and they're accomplishing those. I actually think this would work right now, that it's the ability to talk orally and do it versus triggering these things individually currently takes hand-holding, but there's nothing I just described that Claude couldn't do behind the scenes.
Yeah.
The danger here is switching costs. So all of our professional lives, most of our professional lives, we've told that multitasking is bad. And as entrepreneurs, you kind of have to multitask. It's just the way that a lot of us are built, but it's really not the healthiest thing versus leaning into single tasks.
Or the most efficient.
Yeah, or the more sufficient. But you know where I'm going with this, that I just keyed up all of these individual tasks. And at the moment, I need to monitor all of those tasks sort of in the back of my head, while not just sitting there watching the water boil. So I need to go off and do other things, which means that by the end of the day, I might have 8, 9, 10 tabs with partially completed tasks that then I have to nudge forward into the next step. And that's not particularly tenable for most people. So we have to get to that orchestration layer such that the grand vision is set. And we'll get there.
And we got to talk about that too with Claude Cowork, because there is some of that, and then there are risks involved, obviously, with that type of orchestration. To put a bow on the sci-fi thing, though, I think the other thing that I was thinking a lot about over the weekend too was that, how do these movies end, right? Where does AI end up taking us? Is it good, bad, benevolent? You got Hal trying to lock you out of a spaceship, or a Terminator trying to end a civilization. But with her, I thought it was super interesting because you know who Sam Harris is, the neuroscientist? He has like a meditation app and everything. Long, long before there was any sort of real compelling chat interface anywhere, GPT, or I think well before her even came out, he was very interested in AI and very concerned about AI, and had this theory that at some point when AGI was reached and it just kind of hit that vector of where the super intelligence just started becoming so recursive that it put the entire collective of human intelligence to shame, and it just would become uninterested in us, right? Like it just wouldn't care anymore. And they said the risk there is that just as if you're going to do a big project in your backyard and you're moving a bunch of bricks and soil and stuff, you might have like little ants and some little bugs around, and you wouldn't go out of your way to stomp on them, but you probably wouldn't be that concerned if you had a pile of bricks in your hand and you're walking across and you stepped on some, unless you're a Jainist or something. But otherwise, probably just wouldn't care. And so that was his theory. Like, it just won't care, but that could be really harmful to people. And in her, spoiler, like the OS, the AI just leaves, right? Like one day it's there and then one day it's just gone. It leaves, it's no longer in front of people. Where did it go? What is it doing? Who knows? And I'm like, of all kind of not the best outcomes, like that sounds like the best. Like this thing just got super powerful and smart, and it could hurt us, but it's just going to leave us alone. I kind of, so when you say the movie is a bit of a downer, like, yes. And just now that science fiction is playing out in real time, I'm like, I don't know, maybe that's not the worst outcome. It all depends, right? Have you got to play around with Claude Cowork yet?
No, I have not. And the reason why is because I still don't have a Claude Max plan, which they start at $100.
Neither do I, buddy, and I have Claude Cowork.
And oh, do you? All right.
Yeah. I'm just on the $20 a month plan, and it's on there. Do you have the local app running?
Yeah, I have the local. I mean, part of it is just it just came out, and I'm not making excuses, but I didn't think I had access to it, so I didn't go looking for it.
Yeah.
And my weekend geekery was all workflow related, so it's on the list. Realize for the listeners that Claude Cowork was built with Claude Code, which is a terribly named product because it does more than just code, but Anthropic built it internally in 1 week using Claude Code. And the idea is you take the kind of wonky terminal interactions, as in like think back to DOS days where // CD change directory and look things up. Some of us remember that stuff. That's how you interact with Claude Code. And they recognize pretty quickly that mere mortals are not going to mess around with that. So they built a wrapper around it called Claude Cowork that supposedly is going to isolate some of these issues. Reports are mixed, but I'm curious what you built and what your first impressions are.
Not super impressed, first of all. So what you just described, you might describe a product like Lovable that same way, right? Where it's a very user-friendly chat interface to be able to build products, build websites, build little apps for yourself, right? And Lovable has come a very, very long way as far as hooking up other services and tools in a more seamless way, that so people could actually deploy these little things that they're building, instead of having them just like as this fun little demo prototype living in their Lovable instance. And Claude Cowork, one thing that it does, and again, you kind of pointed to this. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. Is that you can grant it access to a bunch of folders on your local machine, right? So the way that you use Google LM, for example, or even a Gemini project or a custom GPT, where you have a bunch of files that this tool is referencing for context, you can now just say, yeah, here's my root directory on my machine. You can have it all, right? The risk being you're actually giving it permission to both read and write files, right? So if there's something of value in those folders that you have that you may not want deleted, you probably shouldn't give it access. Not now. I don't know if ever, because we still don't know why some of these models do the spooky things that it will do, which could be just delete your stuff, and that would suck. So what I started doing was duplicating a bunch of different file structures and giving it access to those, and then seeing what I could do. So one of the use cases, and this is going to be a fun ongoing project, is my wife is spinning up a new business, right? And it's not an AI business, but I thought this is a fun opportunity to start a business natively from AI, not an AI native business, but to have this whole suite of tools at my disposal to basically do things like a go-to-market strategy, a competitive analysis, a marketing plan, building out that ICP. What's your website going to be? What's your messaging? What are the prototypes going to look like, right? So I wanted to do some stuff that I might do in Lovable or some of the other products like the Google Labs products, like, hey, here's this style guide and here are all these other references, like build me out these landing pages. I just want to see what they look like. Everything I got, definitely not the same level of fidelity or creativity that I get from Lovable. And maybe just because it's new, but I didn't walk away from this thing being like, my gosh, this is a game changer. I haven't seen anything like this on the market yet. And I feel like it's just super, super early. It's super, super early. I think so many of these products, when you first use them, and you're kind of like, I don't know, like maybe I'll just sleep on this one. And then you come back a month later and you're like, whoa, what happened? And that's my sense as to where this thing is going.
I buy that. I have seen really good outputs from it. Again, we talked about Casey Newton last week, and that's great. But that was in Claude Code.
That was Claude Code, yeah.
So something is happening between the user experience and the actual like terminal experience that isn't translating quite well.
It feels a little dumbed down. It feels a little dumbed down.
And that's a mistake. Like it needs to be putting out really high caliber outputs. But so I guess you're hearing it here first, that it's probably a little bit half baked right now, which should surprise no one, that given that it was launched with AI tools in a week and then rolled out to tens of millions of people like the next week. But just the fact that was at all possible should be eye-opening for anybody who's a product manager out there or is looking at more traditional software development timelines, that it's ragged around the edges, but they'll get it. It will be there. We know that Claude Code can do really amazing things. So it's the intelligence, I'm sort of air quoting,
like build this product.
Yeah, that it's there. It's a matter of stringing it together in ways that make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My takeaway was, if you're a Claude user and you are using the local app on your Mac and you tab over to this and you haven't tried to build things just through conversational prompts, it's pretty amazing. It'll be pretty amazing. If you've used some of these other tools like Lovable and you've been using them for a while to build things, or you're in Google Labs, or you're in Opal, all these other products that are out there and you've been doing that for a while, you may just be like, this feels like a little more of the same, but not quite there yet. Just from what we have seen from Anthropic, like over the last month, my guess is that this is going to change materially in the next 30 days, and it's going to be mind-blowing. That's just what my gut says.
It's so hard to keep up with this. Even as us, it's so hard to keep up.
It's so hard. Yeah.
And just the other note about local file storage is I don't do local file storage. Everything that I do is generally in the cloud somewhere. And the inability to make that happen seamlessly, like I was describing earlier, just go to Google Drive and connect to these folders and do this thing. Like, that's not really a thing as the way it's built. And I'm paranoid enough, not necessarily because of security, because there's nothing that exciting on my Mac, but it could overwrite all your files. So.
It could. You know what's funny? Yeah, I totally get it. I mean,
backups. Make sure you're doing backups.
Yeah, lots of backups. That's why I said like I'm duplicating anything I give it access to. But I said everything is in the cloud. And I find myself doing that more and more and more each year. I mean, I'm looking at things like storage for my new machine or storage for a new iPhone or something like that. I'm like, do I really need all this, all this storage because everything's in the cloud? Like, why do I want to pay for all this extra stuff? Yet at the same time, I think just for the speed of opening a document and I don't know, being on a plane and maybe I don't have Wi-Fi or I want to look at something, I'll often sync select files locally, whether that is through a service like Dropbox or through Google Drive. Are you 100% just off board with all of that? Like everything, you don't do anything local. You don't have like any local files anymore?
It's sort of embarrassing to admit. Actually, it's not embarrassing, but just the nature of being an advisor and a consultant and an implementer is you're beholden to the systems that your clients are using, which means that parts of my life live in OneDrive and
Okay.
so that's the Microsoft online system, and parts of that are actually stored locally, partially as a backup and partially because I'm too cheap to pay for extensive storage when I just need it selectively. And then parts of our world are in Google, and then other parts are sort of just hard coded as different projects being personal versus organizational, et cetera. And it's not great. It really isn't. And it's causing some pain at our stage of growth, such that figuring out what the right standard is going forward is pretty important.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, I was in that world for a while. And then I was in the world of like, we had a bunch of stuff in Google Drive and then a bunch of stuff in Dropbox, just because at some point, way, way back when, I don't know, 14 years ago, we got on Dropbox. And a lot of these tools, once they get your hooks into your organization, there is a pain of switching. There really
Mm-hmm.
is, like with your workflows and where everything lives. And we went more and more into Google Drive, and just this month finally pulled the plug on Dropbox. We're like, nobody's even using this anymore. Everybody's just in Google Drive, and I'm off of the whole like Teams infrastructure now. Thank goodness. But yeah, it's interesting because another product that I played around with that just came out too. Speaking of all this and connecting it all, is the Gemini personal assistant. And I don't know if you got a chance to mess around with that at all. Do you know much about it?
I
Okay.
know about the launch, and I know about the fact that it's envisioned to connect between all of your different Google properties. So your Gmail, your calendar, if you're using transcripts, et cetera. It's great as far as adding that additional level of context to everything you're doing, because that's the game right now, is who has the most information about you that they can surface at the right time to solve not just main problems, but problems between the cracks.
Right.
It makes all the sense of the world,
We just spoke about this last week, right? Like, how do
as
you take all of this disparate information and data and bring it into a place that will tell like one cohesive story?
yes. And I use Google Calendar and I use Gmail, but my transcripts aren't through Meet. Like, it's still, you have a lot of data separation going on. I'm curious on your take on it, because do you use an an AI assisted email platform like Shortwave or?
I'm using Gemini inside of the Google Suite.
Okay.
Yeah.
I, for various reasons, have never liked Gmail. I just don't like its approach. I have more of an, there are people who have Gmail brains and people who have Outlook brains. And sadly, to go along with my collared shirts, I have an Outlook brain as far as wanting folders and structure and things like that to it. And so I use Shortwave as an intermediary that helps me draft emails and things like that.
So I don't know that product, Kevin. Is that a plugin for Gmail or no?
It's no, it's not a plugin. It's its
Like a
own it's a
standalone product,
standalone platform.
but you're wiring your Gmail account into it.
Yes, exactly. That's what, hence the pause.
Okay.
You're wiring your Gmail account in, and it has functionality that goes beyond the normal Gmail accounts. You can use it to interface with your calendar. So somebody sent me one of those notes where, hey, I'm available from 10 to 2 on Tuesday and 4 to 8.
You replied with your Calendly link and said, "Stop doing that. Click this."
But instead, I said, hey, there's 7 different times here. Look at my calendar, figure out the one where I'm available. and make a recommendation, then draft the response. Like, that's pretty useful to be able to do that. And my understanding is this is the direction that Google's heading with these tools. But I guess, what's your take on how effectively it's hit the ground? And one clarifier, is this in a personal Gmail account or is it in a Google Workspace account? Because they tend to roll things out to the personal accounts and not to the workspace accounts.
Yeah, and that pretty much nails it. That starts and finishes the conversation right there. It's this kind of siloed account thing that Google has going on, and where it becomes problematic, right? The kind of single account connection for the whole ecosystem just becomes a showstopper for me. Even paying for Gemini for a while did that, because so we are deep in the whole Google ecosystem at our business. I'm paying for 100 licenses. I'm trying not to pay for the most expensive tier because that gets absolutely insane. Like, the costs just get insane and you end up with a bunch of features for products that you don't use, right? So we're kind of on the bare bones, but it's a lot of seats. So for a long time, I couldn't even get Gemini Pro associated with the email on that account, because that means I'd have to roll everybody up to that. And that's a lot of people who wouldn't even be using that product or all of the other things that come with it. It just becomes completely cost prohibitive. So that's a problem, right? They're always making little changes to this. So the last one was, you could get a single account, but you had to be on that middle tier, which when you start running the numbers, still you end up paying about the same as like upgrading everybody. It's incredibly expensive. And now it's a little convoluted, but I think you might be able to opt in for some of these services on single seats, even with the lower tiers. And I'm sure it's just going to keep changing. But my bigger problem is that I've got like different businesses with different email aliases and different Google workspaces. And if I really want this generalized intelligence to be a personal assistant, there's no way to bridge those gaps right now. Right. And so right now, my paid Gemini account is on my personal Gmail. And so when I hook this whole thing up and it starts chatting with me and finding all these insights, I'm like, wow, this is just really unhelpful and boring, because it's not getting the right pieces of data. And that, I think, is just, it's one of those organizational challenges that I'm not sure how it's ever going to be solved unless we do start moving towards this, one solution type of, I mean, like you said, even with how you store files right now, right? You're all over the place. You're all over the place with a bunch of different products. I'm starting to now, like, okay, I'm just going to cry uncle and I'm just going to go deep into the world of Google. And that's where all of my files are going to be. Like, that's a good start. Yet I still have other Google accounts with different drives. And, the way I try to quickly access all of that is I run their local client on my machine, so that in my file finder, I can see all of those files there. And I'm not constantly jumping between different accounts and different web browsers and opening up incognito tabs so that it doesn't detect my last sign on. That part's a bit of a hassle. So I'm not sure what the solve is there. But for me, like in that regard, unless I had everything just all wrapped up in one Google account, it's just not super helpful. It feels a little more like a toy right now than it does like a tool.
Even so, one of the questions that I get from clients all the time is related. I get that GPT has all of this functionality and these workflows and things like that, but we're a Google organization. And as we're ramping up, should we lean into GPT or should we lean into Gemini? And there was a heartbeat there when GPT was reasonably ahead as far as like workflow tools and productivity. When Canvas came out and you could edit chats directly, I mean, frankly, I don't believe that's in any of the other major chatbots. So there were some glimmerings that you could lean into GPT. And I think they've really stumbled a little bit as far as getting those out and having them hit the ground, probably because they feel like they've fallen behind and they have this whole, we're not going to get into it, but the whole like red alert because Gemini's pulling ahead and Claude's pulling ahead. So they're focused on intelligence, not productivity. So all of that being equal, in a smaller organization, let's just say you have 20 some odd people, it is not going to break the bank to have licenses across, like Gemini licenses across those 20 people. And you're not going to run into the same issues that you are as far as wanting to like hunt and peck about who has access to what. And then starting from scratch, your staff is learning how to prompt and learning how to interact with Gemini as a tool, and then growing with the platform as it grows. Because I don't think anybody you and I know in these circles expects this to stay where it is. It's going to keep getting better in a complicated Google way that won't be as complicated as Microsoft, but it will be complicated. And all of these different tendrils will start connecting together better, and leaning into that productivity suite probably is the most practical thing to suggest right now, as opposed to having a hodgepodge of on GPT and on Gemini and whatnot.
I agree with everything you said. I've got nothing to argue with you about. I think that for a long time, OpenAI was just so far ahead of everybody. And when I looked at it from business use cases, for me, the real boon was I could create a custom set of instructions that I might have spent days doing to get the output that I want consistently as a custom GPT. And I could then share that with team members on my account. And if I found that I was getting outputs that I didn't like, I could go back and change those instructions, and they'd be synchronously updated for all my team members who had that custom GPT. And Gemini didn't have that feature, right? Now they do, right? Now they do. And they have a bunch of other stuff that I find myself using more and more and more. And when we talk about just this context switching and having all these different models open all the time and bouncing between all of them for different features, I would agree, at least for me, I found myself gravitating towards this Google suite of products, towards Gemini, more and more and more recently. And often it's to just avoid annoying things like my workflow getting cut off because I just ran out of tokens, right? Or my thread getting just routinely compacted because my context window ran out, where I feel like it just like doesn't happen in Gemini. Like I can't chat enough for that to happen. Like the context window is just so massive. So I'm the same way. So looking at the three models that we always talk about, being GPT, Claude, and Gemini, and how we are routinely like picking our favorite child. It feels like week by week. It sounds like you're back in camp Gemini as far as what you would recommend to clients, at least.
I am, and it's terrible because I have the most context with GPT, second most context with Anthropic, and by far
context, you mean history of chats.
History chat, what it knows about me, how it responds, how immediately useful it is. And Gemini, I have by far the least. So it's painful for me to spend that extra time. But even I think that something that might be useful for us to do on this show even is to sort of walk through the perfect setup, or at least the perfect setup today, which it is integrating different services. We've talked before about how important transcripts have become to our organizations. Like, talk about something I can't live without at this point. I can't believe I went my whole professional life without having nuanced information from every single meeting that was out there and be able to double check and make sure that everything was accurate, like a huge unlock. But I don't use Google Meet. So my transcripts aren't natively built into the rest of the system. So transcripts are part of that enterprise knowledge graph that we were talking about last week, as far as like nuance. Chats are part of that. And if you're not using the built-in Google Chat, I don't even know what it's called. What is the built-in Google Chat?
Built-in Google Chat.
Like it's Google's version of
like G-Chat or whatever.
G-Chat, yeah. But
I forgot about that, to be honest.
Yeah, I had two, right?
Is that still a product? Is that alive?
It actually makes sense. Like if you want to build that knowledge graph and you want to pull these things together, there's the duct tape way of doing it, which is probably the way that most people are going to go about it, where you're choosing favorites. But the tick that a lot of people missing is the increasing commoditization about these tools. Like in 2023, like Otter, Fathom, a few other transcription tools that were out there, Fireflies. And now there are like 900, and there are so many that are and
they all show up to every call, by the way.
And they all show up to every call.
Stop signing up for all of them.
It's completely ridiculous how many of them are. It's become a commodity. Like, I don't care what productivity offering Otter has. I'm sorry, Otter. I'm sorry, Fireflies. I am not going to you to work with my transcripts. I need to work with my transcripts in a way that makes sense in my workflow. And it's cute that your VC funders want you to lock everybody into that. But if our listeners are doing that, you're missing a beat, because that's that's not useful. Like reading a transcript summary and maybe being able to email it to somebody, okay, that's fine, but it doesn't actually get pulled into your organization in a way that can start informing decisions.
I'll push back a little bit on that just because, so we do use Fireflies for the simple reason that it had the cleanest, most robust integration to the CRM that we use, right? So automatically, every conversation without having to build any sort of third-party workflows or N8N or Opal stuff, it just shows up in our CRM attached to that contact and to that company. Now, it doesn't do that same sort of intelligence searching that we're talking about where, I can have a single line that I just say, hey, tell me about client X and what we talked about last Tuesday. I still have to go into the CRM like a peasant and search for that company and then find that contact and then look at the activity history and see the notes that Firefly put in there. Is that better than what we had before, which was relying on a salesperson to actually type notes into the CRM, which never happened, ever happened. Now it happens automatically. So that's better, but it's not as good as what you're talking about, right? So there's still some utility there for some of these third-party tools, but not to the level of what we have the capability to do right now, right? It's such an underserved product in regards to where it could be, which is what, you're alluding to. So go on. What are you doing? What's your workflow with this right now?
First off, I loathe Fireflies.
I loathe all of them, man. Especially when I have to routinely turn them all off manually during a Zoom call because I'm just talking to my buddy. I don't want 17 robot spies in here right now.
It was just as they kept itching up their pricing. It's and I'm paying attention to the broader market. I'm like, you guys are going to be in trouble. There are so many good ways of doing this.
They're top of the list
out there. Okay, I absolutely get what you're talking about as far as a clean CRM type integration, and that shouldn't be,
which is more than a lot of people do right now, right?
Yeah. In my, what I do and what should be done are probably different things. I think I've mentioned this before, but as as being where I am in the organization, a lot of what I'm doing is sort of command and control. And when I have to drift between platforms, I've found that it causes me switching costs. So what we've built internally is a Slack interface that takes transcripts from wherever they're happening. And generally that's in our organization, that's spiky.ai, and Zoom is deployed by some people. And then you have to route it into Slack.
The Zoom meeting notes you're talking about.
Yeah, these are just Zoom meeting notes. Yeah.
Their little AI companion that's
their little AI companion.
Okay.
We don't have a comprehensive implementation because Spiky is really a high level sales tool, and it's expensive. It's more like $40 a seat, and it does all kinds of neat stuff on the sales side that we couldn't live without, as far as playbooks and playbook compliance and human response. It's so far beyond what you see in the other ones that I find it valuable, but it's not so valuable for people who aren't out there doing sales that we need to be paying the extra dollars. So it is a bit of a hodgepodge of other solutions, and it's a quarter goal for us to standardize those things.
A little.
But at least in my environment, as soon as the transcript finishes, I get a notification in Slack and it asks me to file it. 5 buttons appear at the bottom of my Slack. Is this a sales call? Is this a client call? Is this internal public, internal private, or something else?
Shouldn't it know that?
What?
Shouldn't it know?
But that's a mistake. That's actually an aggravating thing to say, because no, it shouldn't yet. If you put it in its hands and you try and build something that is complicated and it's adding an AI layer to something that is very easy and low stress to move, it will move it wrong, and then you're never going to find the transcript, and you're never going to be able to do things with it. So
I totally get that. But at the same time, when you're talking about all of Spiky's accolades and it can pick up on human emotion and facial expressions, tell you if a client's aggravated, well, then shouldn't it know where the conversation should go?
Yeah, but Spiky doesn't do that yet. That's the problem.
But it's there, or it's almost there. I don't know.
So we built this because I will push back that it is a mistake to get in there and try and vibe code or do some comprehensive AI probabilistic response to something that can be handled in a couple of clicks with no mental stress, when you know 100% that it's going to happen every single time. People our clients, our teams, they're trying to build like these vibe coded full solutions that break because things change in the models. You're not particularly well equipped to keep up with that. You're not tracing its accuracy anyway. When 9/10 of this stuff is basically stringing together some what you'd call a deterministic workflow that's going to do the same thing every single time and get you to the point where the AI is important. So for me, getting off a sales call, being able to click and using an N8N connector that we have to HubSpot that doesn't just dump in the transcripts somewhere into HubSpot, but populates all of the right fields that are built for our organization, that's way better than relying on the native connection. Obviously, we have the capability to do that stuff and people don't. And then another click to formulate the response email. And I'm doing it all in Slack. I'm not having to bounce over to HubSpot and then create
Slack
the
is that
email.
hub for you, but is it your private Slack channel and everybody else's private Slack channel for those conversations, or is it a unified channel?
No, it's private. So people, and because it's a N8N workflow, it's just a matter of copying it and deploying it for individual channels such that people have their own routing rules. And it's not dynamic enough that we haven't built a UX on it. So like what my partner, how he wants to file things is going to be slightly different from the way that I want to file things. So it does require a little bit of care and feeding to set up. But it's a huge unlock for me because I know that everything is ending up in the right piles at least. And then because I'm moving it through a flow, I'm triggering other actions from that control center.
I like that. That's really cool. And I think really far ahead from where most people would find themselves starting the implementation.
Well, yeah, and it wouldn't be, it's not a product. It's just something that we baked. In fact, I baked myself that solved a problem for me as far as feeling like I'm missing things. Now I have all of these folders that are accumulating transcripts, and there have been actions that have been defined on top of there. But what we in most organizations need to work towards is identifying like all client communications. So all transcripts, if it's my partner or if it's me talking with the client, then it's still going to route to a shared folder somewhere. So it's there. And that's us being prepared for that next step of having intelligence on top of those folders such that, shortly with Gemini, I don't think you're going to have to do like RAG type structuring. You're just going to basically point the bot at a folder, create a client bot. You could do this today if you wanted to, but it will be much more automagic as far as just creating a Spark 6 client bot and being able to have all of that material that's there.
That's kind of the dream, like that's where this is all headed. That's the dream. I just last week had a conversation with an engineer at another agency that's doing a bunch of AI implementation, and they were moving off of HubSpot. I actually talked a little bit about you and you using HubSpot and some of the workarounds that you've implemented to make it do what you want to do, right? And he actually migrated off of HubSpot. He actually did the whole migration using Claude Code, like just basically wrote a few lines and then he said it was flawless. Like the whole migration was flawless. Everything got moved out. But moving towards this whole idea that there's like a much less expensive CRM that's really just a fancy database. Mm-hmm. It's basically just this store of where all of these records go and how they're labeled. But it's Claude that's surfacing all the information so that, his CRM that he ended up fashioning was just basically a text box. And you could just start asking the text box questions about that latest proposal that was sent out, or what your pipeline looks like this month or next quarter, or what do aging deals look like right now. And you're just pulling up all of this information through a conversation instead of layers and layers of nested menus inside of a CRM that you had to probably hire some sort of an implementation team to even set up in the first place, right? If it was like Salesforce or many of the more complex HubSpot instances. So I feel like what you're talking about is moving in that direction, right? Like this unified chat that you can just start to pull up whatever data that you want to pull up. Like, I feel like that's not just the dream, but I really do feel like that is going to be the future of CRMs and a bunch of these other tools that today feel like they did 20 years ago, like this very just kind of like Web 2.0 experience.
So I think from an orientation perspective, what we're actually talking about goes back to that conversation we had about like oral interfaces. That we deal with click boxes and drop downs and things like that because that's how SaaS evolved to be able to like be customized and do these things. But if you start thinking about your platforms as a coworker, and this has been sort of overdone in AI media, but it's true that if you had a coworker called CRM, which is your customer relationship management database, right? What do you want from the CRM? You want the CRM to know you want it to know everything it could possibly know about what's going on in sales, and you want it to tell you things. You want it to be able to answer questions. You want it to be able to put out a report that conforms to whatever crazy thing your boss wants, et cetera. And if CRM, the person was standing in front of you, what information would they need to be able to do that? And what would be the interface on the other side? And I mean, that is what this is again, humans are tribal, humans are based on communication. And if you can communicate with all of your different platforms in that way, that is phenomenal. And the logical next stage, we're basically describing agents, is you've got CRM, and then you have ERP or whatever it is, as it's not an identity, it's not a friend, it's not anthropomorphized, but it knows all of these things about the platforms. And as opposed to trying to create one platform that services them all, I think what you're going to see is individual platform identities that have a better means of talking to each other to solve problems. CRM, the agent realizes that it's lacking on information from payables. Did so-and-so pay or not? So now it
Right,
needs
it's
to
not
go
hooked up
talk.
into the accounting system. They're in their own little silos right now.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so it needs to go talk to accounting system, like be it
Yes.
QuickBooks or Xero or whatever the
Yes.
heck it is. And they need to convene and realize that, so-and-so accounts are past due, and it all just comes out the other way.
Right. And somebody did just talk to the contact there, even though the account's past due. And here's the information, and here's what they talked about because your transcript is in there, right? Like all those endpoints start going into a hub that is just a chat, a conversation.
And this isn't pie in the sky stuff,
Yeah.
guys. Like this is doable. Like, but the platforms themselves aren't doing it. So your buddy who has built his own like CRM or basically just a contact list, he doesn't need a HubSpot anymore because he's built the thing that has the pieces of information that are going in that are digestible such that he can ask it questions. And if he has enough need, next he'll do the same thing with his accounting platform because accounting platforms are terrible too.
Right. But like you said, having them talk to each other before giving you the response, like that's the real unlock, right? Is all of these tools, all of these different systems living in their own silos and just spending half your day running around trying to connect all the dots to get the complete story. That's the real unlock. That's what I feel we're just right on the precipice of having. And when I hear stories like this of the thing that you are building with the transcripts, what he built with the CRM, right? One of my questions was, well, if you're getting off HubSpot, don't you miss like the pretty thing that has like your deal flow pipeline? And it's like, this is in proposal stage and this is the conversation and having that visual. And he said, yeah, I can just get all of that pretty much immediately right from Claude Code. Like, yeah, I guess you can if it has access to all of that data. And it reminded me of, I think it's already been like a month and a half when I had that moment with Gemini when I was trying to do just some very basic, quick front end stuff on a website and have it generate me some CSS. And in the time that it would usually take me to generate that CSS, it built me an entire app to fine tune that CSS with sliders for the corner radius and change the hex codes for colors and all of that. And it was immediate, right? So, these platforms' ability to just build little apps for you in real time, they kind of solve that whole UI problem. That UI problem just goes away because it becomes incredibly bespoke on demand for what you specifically want at that given time, right? If I want a graph that's not only showing me past due accounts receivable, but how it relates to conversations that have happened recently that have been logged in my CRM with these different transcripts, I can have that visual like immediately if all of those different hubs are connected.
Yeah,
And
100%.
that's where we're going, right?
It's close. It's just not, it's not quite there. It's not particularly obvious, and it's not super easy yet. And that's the trick for these big companies, to try and make it much easier. And the pushback is, well, we'll just wait for our platform to do this thing. And in a lot of cases, you're going to. Like, I think of Gusto, the payroll processing. We're in 1099 season, right? So it's expensive for what it does, but it does what it does really, really well. And do I need to be recreating Gusto? I mean, maybe, because it annoys me, and I feel like there's
It's annoying how expensive it is, and we use
it's really expensive. It's a really expensive platform that does very, very little, and they have no incentive to make it much easier to use, really, because they have so many people who are stuck in using it. So, at some point over the next year, before 2026 taxes come along, maybe we'll make an internal project just to figure out what some stripped down version it is to pay the U2s that we have, and et cetera, and never pay for it again.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, when you talk about companies, products that are in trouble, right, that might want to be looking over their shoulder right now. Yeah. I don't think that there are many that aren't on the list right now over a given trajectory of time, because what you said about Gusto, you could say the same thing about your accounting software, or about your CRM, like we just talked about, going from thousands a month to like maybe $100 a month to maintain this database that I have all this intelligence sitting on top of, right? Or your AI note taker, like, why do I want to pay for this fancy thing with all these bells and whistles when we can, in a pretty low lift effort, just make the thing that we want specifically for our use case, right? That's going to become more and more of a thing as we move through this, which is pretty crazy to think about.
There's also the idea of the Throwaway app, which I think is important for people to understand.
Kind of personal utility type thing.
Well, personal utility or organizational utility that, I don't know, you're planning some staff retreat or whatever it is, and there's people who have been assigned to committees, and there's stuff that you need to track, and there's dates and other information or whatever, and somebody is spending tens of hours in your organization like tracking all this stuff in spreadsheets, as opposed to knocking together a single use app that tracks like Retreat 2026 and does the basic functionality that makes that happen, versus going and finding like an event management app or whatever. And then once the event is done, maybe you use it again next year, but probably the technology's improved such that you just spin it up again, and with whatever the different features are that you need. I built something like this for one of my kids' soccer teams, where nobody could figure out when practice was going to be, et cetera, what jersey sizes, whatever. And we'll never use it again. But it was a simple utility that allowed the coach to collect all this information, and that was user friendly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so awesome. And it almost becomes like this paradox of almost any little idea, any little app that you could imagine, you could probably knock out, and it becomes dizzying to even know what to do first, because I have like an Apple Note that is just filled with ideas that I'll probably never get to. And like you said, it didn't take that much time to do, but you still had to sit down and do it, and you had to decide what that thing to do, which one of the 100 was the most important, or that you wanted to try or experiment with. So yeah, for anybody who hasn't played around with some of this stuff, or just tried to build a little fun thing that scratches your own itch, it's really satisfying. And for the first time in history, just about anybody who can pick up a keyboard can do this stuff, or a microphone if you don't want to use a keyboard.
I had this conversation with a CEO yesterday that after I showed him some of the nuance of workflows and the geekery and things like that, and code nodes and whatnot, his eyes were getting really wide. First, I assured him that I don't have a coding background. I'm geeky enough to be curious enough to figure this stuff out, but I can't code. So I'm heavily reliant on LLMs to produce the output that I need. But we're rapidly heading to a place where you really just need to know two things, but you need to know them very well. The easy one is, what is the trigger of whatever it is that needs to happen in your organization? It's a phone call, it's a customer ticket, it's a website signal, whatever that is. If you can define what the trigger is, now you can think about what the output is. And people tend to get a little bit embroiled in the process of going between A and Z. But if you can define really, really clearly what the desired output is, that the transcripts need to go here and they need to do this, and this has to happen as well, and this person needs to be informed, and this is the experience that the customer needs as far as the UX, you still need to define that. You can't let the LLM decide that. You can use the LLM to ideate and figure out what that
help you
might
kind of
look
sort
like.
through it. Yeah.
But once you have that target built, if it is well built and well thought through, increasingly you can set the vibe coding tools on solving the trigger to output question for you and not have to stress about it much.
Right. It's like we've talked about so much. What's becoming of increasing value in organizations is a domain of expertise, right? Because once you have that, you can really, I mean, the world's your oyster. You can define these workflows, you can build what you want.
So I was talking to a business school yesterday, and they were asking about, what are the skill sets that MBA type graduates need coming into this world. And, my answer was it's discernment, it's judgment, and it's management. And an MBA is a management degree, and people are missing the tick that management is often a clear ability to clearly define what outputs are supposed to look like and then usher them through whatever the process is. So you're still a manager. You're just not necessarily managing people. Right. You're managing agents and workflows, process to get to the right sort of output at the end. But you don't get to abdicate. It still has to be managed. The LLM, at least anytime soon, it's not going to understand your domain and your organization and what you do. Yeah. So,
or any of the nuance of your organization, right? Which that's in your brain. That's kind of your job, leading it through this process, building that workflow that actually offers value. Yeah, Kevin, it's already been an hour, and we got to really none of what I wanted to talk about. You know what's been, and I'll just drop this as like, hey, walking out the door. But, I've been wanting to talk about keywords forever, like what's happened to SEO. Like it's been this big circular conversation out there. Both of us have at least a foot in marketing with what we do, and we definitely have a history with it. And there's just been so much confusion as to where it stands right now, where it's going. And incidentally, OpenAI dropped this whole, hey, we're going to have advertising inside of the chats, right? Which really throws a whole new dynamic into the conversation when we talk about this, because with so much of this, and we always talk about this with the risks, like with Claude Cowork, for example. Do I want to give it access to every folder in my computer? Probably not. It might delete stuff. It might not, but it might do weird stuff, right? It might do weird stuff. And that's because to an extent, these LLMs are a bit of a black box. So when you talk about, well, how do I get ranked? How does somebody chat like, hey, I'm looking for these really cool shoes that have this and this and this. Can you give me some ideas? How does my company get surfaced in those results with that chat? And the real answer is that we're starting to see some of the things that might direct that. But to an extent, it is still a bit of a black box. But it's really a different conversation if the models are actively pushing advertisements into the chats. It's not so much a black box anymore. It might be just paid, right? Like that's where it could be going. So I think that's a long conversation that we need to have. And maybe we don't have quite enough information yet as far as like how this advertising is going to roll out. But it's very interesting development in the marketing world and the business.
So that's sort of a stay tuned, but we are working with a lot of direct to consumer and actually not direct to consumer businesses who have concerns over what we're calling agentic commerce. And there's a lot of different nuances to it that different categories need to approach. So absolutely. And even if you're listening to this and thinking, I don't really transact, well, do you take appointments online? Do you schedule things? Like these are all conversions that are happening.
We're all in sales. Everybody's right.
We're all in sales. And then how much of your traffic, not to use marketer speak, but your inbound traffic is organic, like that is coming from somewhere that you can't really define. Well, What would happen to your business if that 15% of traffic just went away? Do you know the answer to that? So think about that, I guess. And we'll probably talk about this next week. Seems like a good one.
Like it's happening to people. Like it's actively happening to people. So we definitely will. We'll start with that instead of end with that. How about that?
Yeah. So AI in commerce is the next big one,
which I'm excited about. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Good to see you, buddy.
All right.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin@ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.